like for us to spend the most of our time together sharing ideas, but also gathering ideas about how to implement some really easy strategies and techniques into your carpet whole group time to get kids engaged. So let me just start by saying what started as a really innocent invitation to share some ideas with some teachers turned into this very formal sign-in sheet. We've got the camera over there. So Anna came to me today making sure everything was in order. And I said, Anna, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And she said, it's okay, you're going to go out with a bang. And she left, and I thought, or a flop. So it is up to you guys to help me go out with a bang. So a little bit about me. I think most everybody has probably at least seen me in the building. But a little bit of my history here at JEL, and I'll try not to get emotional. This is the beginning of my 8th year at Village. It's kind of ironic that I'm doing this thing because I started here. I was hired as one of the half-day kindergarten teachers. That seems ancient, doesn't it, to say half-day. And the other part of my time was dedicated to coaching, which, if you know anything about half-day teaching, it really is not a half day. It's a full day. You only get the kids for a portion of the day, but you still work the entire day on teaching and getting things ready for your classroom. So coaching was kind of, it was my love, and it was really what I wanted to do when I came here, but I couldn't spend a lot of time doing it. But thinking back, I did some of these very same kinds of trainings and PDs when I could that very first year. So I've come completely full circle, so it's kind of cool. So anyway, in this building, as I've said, I was half-day kindergarten teacher, coach. I started my second year as a full-time coach, in September. I transitioned into the assistant principal's position, and that's where I have been the rest of my time here. So before that, I was in Boyle County for 18 years teaching kindergarten. The love of my career is in the classroom. And then before that, I was in Washington County for 6 years. So what I have to offer you today is from my experience as classroom teacher and as the perspective of an administrator who has been able to and been fortunate enough to see lots and lots of great things in classrooms with cooperative learning, Kagan strategies, and student engagement. So before we get officially started, if you guys don't know me or my habits, I'm a Googler, I'm a researcher, I'm a reader. And some of what I'll share today are websites and things that either make me laugh or make me think or make me cry. So hopefully not too much crying. So as I was preparing, I got this email, which as a teacher and an administrator, you get all kinds of things through email, and it really made me stop and think. So as you've started your year, and as you start your career, there's all kinds of misconceptions about what your class is going to be like, what your team is going to be like, what your school is going to be like every year. And so hopefully today I can dispel or debunk some of those misconceptions about cooperative learning and the difficulty of implementing that in your classroom. But I ran across this article, and it's 5 teacher expectations and the realities that shatter them. So in other words, there are a lot of misconceptions here, and I think you guys can relate after your first 9 weeks of school. So the first one is students will always behave, right? That's what you want to believe. Is it reality? There will be ample instructional time. So everything that you are supposed to teach and you're required to teach, you're going to have all kinds of time to do that. Not, right? There's nothing that will interrupt your instruction with kids. How was today? With pictures. And then everyone, including students, will love your lessons, right? You've had perfect lessons, nothing's gone awry at all. Probably a really big misconception. And then everything will work like it's supposed to. Yes? 100% of the time? No, not really. So with all of that, you, I'm sure, have heard a lot about student engagement, cooperative learning. Kagan is kind of the tagline for all of that. And it is very valuable, and it's been around for many, many years. In fact, probably my first or second year as a teacher, I heard cooperative learning, and I went to a training. I don't remember the details of it, but I remember going back into my classroom with my co-teacher, and we were convinced that we had to group our kids into groups. There was no rhyme or reason with that, but they all had to wear a little tag that labeled their job within that group. So there was like a recorder, there was a person to keep time, there was a person to keep peace, and I can't remember all of those titles, but everybody had to wear a tag to represent their importance in that group. Other than that, because I had to cut, laminate, cut again, put them on strings, other than that, I don't really remember a whole lot about group learning or cooperative learning. So over the years, like everything in education, things evolve, research changes. I think we learn more and more about different things as time goes on. And so cooperative learning has truly evolved over my 30 years in education. And about midway, I was sent to a Kagan training with Loyal County Schools, and I was lucky enough to go to Disney World for that training, which was a super great incentive to go and learn about it. And like all trainings, when a district or a school sends you to something phenomenal like that, you have to come back and share. And so with that, I was able to really think about, utilize, and implement cooperative learning strategies per Kagan in my classroom and see the results and see the impact. And I know sometimes we think, gosh, this is just one more thing we have to do. So hopefully today I will be able to share with you just a little bit of some strategies. And I'm going to say right now, here's my disclaimer. I am not a certified Kagan trainer, and they get really kind of crazy with it. You can go and train to be a trainer. I'm not, and not everything I talk about today is going to be Kagan. A large portion of it is. And then some of the Kagan things that I share with you have my own twist to it. So I've simplified some things, I've deleted some things, just because I've been where you are, and you know, best laid plans are not always what works in your classroom. So whatever I'm able to share with you today, or whatever you all share with each other today, take that back and think about how it works in your room. So personalize it, specialize it to meet your students' needs. So with every training, the trainers, PD people want you to have target goals. Our takeaways today is, my hope for you all is that you have a better awareness of the impact of increasing student engagement in terms of what that does for classroom management, what it does for class behaviors as well as individual behaviors, and really in helping you create a student-centered classroom versus a teacher-centered classroom. And we'll talk more about that as we go on. So, and again, as I said, I hope you are able to leave here with a couple of strategies for quick implementation. So today's format for learning, because it is student engagement, this is not going to be a sit and get. Remember where I said at the beginning, it's either going to be a bang or a bust? I need for you to participate today. So just as soon as I get this up. So I know that the PD was advertised as Cooperative Learning / Kagan Strategies. And as I started to really think about what is it that I want you to leave with, it's more about getting students engaged and involved, not just in the classroom, but in their own learning. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I titled it Student Engagement and What's All the Fuss About? So I do have, and I'll tell you this too, because some of you have lived a little bit with me. Technology is not my area of expertise. And PowerPoints are not my thing. But it does help me stay on track. So if you see me going off on a tangent, you can just point to the screen and I'll get back on track. So really the PowerPoint is for me and not so much for you. So what is all the fuss about? So I've got an article in here that I found as I was reading along, and there are 6 strategies that 21st century skills that this research company, I don't want to say company, but researchers found important to be in early childhood classrooms. And so number 2 is cooperative learning structures. So I'm going to read to you what that is a little bit, and I'm just going to take excerpts out of that. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it starts with teacher-centered instruction has had its day. That's kind of where I started. Effective teachers are increasingly using a student-centered approach. So what is that? Cooperative learning sparks engagement in classrooms by encouraging interaction among the students themselves. So I think when we think about early childhood and the importance of our role, I think we think that we are kind of the dictators of their learning. This approach takes a whole different turn, and it really becomes more about students learning from other students. So another little piece of that is students work just as hard as the teachers do. No longer is it a one-man show. Teachers become the facilitator instead of the dictator. It leads to higher achievement, which we'll talk more about. They even reference Kagan in this. But what does that look like in the classroom? It's lively scenes of both movement and stimulating discussions. So, as we move on, oh dear. As we move on, I want you guys to just stop and think for just a second. And as I would do in the classroom with students, again, I need you to be engaged. So a little bit of what I'm going to ask you to do is going to be modeling what you can do with your kids. So anytime in the classroom, I would say, let's stop and think about something. So what do you look like when you're thinking? And the kids would say different things. But I oftentimes would say, when you're thinking, I need to know you're thinking, so you need to look like you're thinking. So you might be scratching your head, rubbing your chin, tapping your cheek. So choose one of those and think about for just a second what engagement looks like in your classroom right now. So participate a little bit. You can scratch your head, you can rub your chin, tap your cheek. You can even wrinkle your eyebrows when you're thinking, good, Brandy, I can see your hair.
That's what all of my do.
Interesting face.
So when your students are on the carpet specifically, because we're going to talk mostly about whole group time, what are you asking them to do? And you guys can just share out. What are you asking your kids to do when they're on the carpet?
Listen.
Listen. What else?
Collecting their thoughts. We're not telling them how to go.
Right. That's what you're hoping they're doing. Okay.
Participate.
Participate. Okay.
We've been doing the think, turn, tell, when we're
Okay.
talking about a discussion.
Good.
The second steps.
Good. Probably this first 9 weeks, the reality is, you've probably said, don't talk to anybody sitting on the carpet next to you. Don't touch anybody. Stay in your own space, right? Crisscross applesauce, you know. All of those things that are very important for procedures in the classroom and organization. And so that students can listen to you, what? Teach, right? So today, even though active listening is a very important part of your classroom, and you've worked very hard these first few weeks of school to get your children to listen actively. You know, eyes are watching, we do the whole second steps piece to that. We are going to focus on active learning. So what does that look like? This all started a little bit with me working in a classroom this year. Just a few weeks ago, classroom that had several challenging behaviors. There was a particular time of the day that was particularly hard and just needed 2 extra hands, 2 extra eyes. And so as I was going in and talking with the teacher, we just decided that, you know, this would be an opportunity for me to do some modeling with the kids and do some Kagan structures with her kiddos. So after just a very few short time teaching the structures with this classroom, with these students, I think I was in there 3 times, they were able to really change what this whole group carpet time looked like, from kids rolling on the carpet, flipping back on the carpet, touching each other, crawling up in each other's face, to an organized time for them to interact with each other. So I want to show you the video of what that looks like, hopefully. And it's going to be offset.
You just scroll over.
Oh, it won't let me. Oh, it's scroll.
Your neighbor will be on down, in the box and turn around. I'm very happy to see you. Reach your neighbor will be on down, in the box and turn around. I'm very happy to see you.
Okay, so that's just I don't know why that's doing that. Does anybody know why that's doing that? Can you help, Aaron?
Maybe. I think it just needs your scooter for the whole screen.
Oh, well, hello. Let's see.
I don't know if you can get over there though, or maybe not in this. No, that's not working on yours. I don't know then.
Okay, we'll see. I can try.
I think it's not.
I don't know. You do it. I tried the thing that you taught me, the
Control.
control.
Minus.
It didn't work.
Okay. Let's just hope we can get through this. There we go. So what is the fuss and the facts about cooperative learning and Kagan strategies? So the fact is, cooperative learning is a high-yield strategy that does increase student achievement. Years and years and years of research, lots of time invested in figuring out and finding the data that supports this. So you've probably heard two of these names, or these two names, John Hattie. I don't even know Marzano's first name. Like, as I was looking at it, was just, but his name's been around as long as I've been around, so a long time. So with John Hattie's meta-analysis research, and I promise I'm not going to talk a lot about this because it's important, but it's not what I want us to spend our time. He found that in education, there are over 252 things that have a positive or negative impact on student learning, most of which are positive. And he ranked those with what he terms as effect sizes. So when we look at this chart and we scroll down here to all these 250 things, cooperative learning is right here. Can you guys see that? It's cooperative learning versus competitive learning. And the effect size, what that essentially means is you can gain 0.53, which is a little more than half of a year's worth of learning based on that strategy. We can go back to the chart to Marzano's 9 high-yield instructional strategies that I know you all have heard of before. Cooperative learning is listed as one of the 9. But as I was looking through this research and all of this information, I think the coolest thing that I found, it downloaded, is that with some of the strategies that we'll talk about today, here's cooperative learning, it yields a 23 percentile gain. So you can see what teachers do, what students do, and all of this is linked in here so you guys can spend time looking at it later. I think the coolest thing that I found, and probably knew but just had not processed it, is that all of these things are so overlapping that when you implement cooperative learning in your classroom and some of these strategies, you are multiplying the impact because you're covering some of the other things that affect teaching and learning in the classroom per John Hattie and Marzano. So it's not just cooperative learning by itself that's going to give you gains with your students. It's multiplied by overlapping some of the skills that we're asking students to do. So let's see if I can get back here to my PowerPoint. There we go. And so what are some of the skills that are enhanced through these strategies? Just kind of a no-brainer, social skills. When students are interacting with each other and you set the parameters and the structure and the procedures for that, they're going to have better skills in the social area. Speaking and listening skills, that's what you're asking students to do. As they work together, particularly in partners or pairs, you're asking them to do things that good speakers do, like look your listener in the eye. You're asking listeners to do specific things, like nod your head as you're listening, so you're actively listening to them. Other skills that are going to be enhanced through the use of strategies, following directions, because you're breaking things down step by step by step, and it's fun. They're going to like that. And then, of course, you're using these strategies to implement some practice of content skills. So you're getting lots of things from just this one strategy. Additional benefits. What are they? So some additional benefits with structures put in place. Classroom management gets really tight and nice and clean. There's no question about expectations or what students are doing or what you're doing during much of that whole group time. your whole group time becomes way more interactive. It's not a bad thing, and it's very common to see in many classrooms one student helping the teacher do a task or a job, or lead a discussion, or lead something on the carpet. When you're implementing some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today, you've got all of your students engaged in the same kinds of activities, and they're all learning at the same time together. So you go from one student having the opportunity to deeply learn something to having 100% of your students engaged in learning. Social skills happen and are practiced within an authentic setting. Much like you saw in the video, those kids that was a morning meeting, that was their greeting, and it just seemed more natural. We put some music to it, they learned some words, but you could tell they were having fun too. And I think the biggest additional benefits is that students become peer coaches, peer tutors, and the whole process of learning is a shared experience. So what is the impact? And why does anybody really care? Well, the impact is this. You end up with more confident, independent learners in your classroom. You have teams of learners, whether it's partners and pairs on the carpet or small groups at tables working together, but as a whole class, that group becomes a much more cohesive learning group. You provide a safe, supportive classroom environment for students to make mistakes, to be wrong, and not be scrutinized for it. It's okay, that's how we learn. It's how we learn best. So you really build in that mindset of, this is how I'm learning and it's okay. And so students aren't comparing each other, they're helping each other. You end up with more socially acceptable behaviors, and all of that equals happier students and happier teachers, and ultimately you end up with higher academic achievement. And I've been where you are, and I have said those words as an administrator, but what I want to say to you today, it's not for the sake of what the district expects you to do as a teacher, what your admin expects you to do as a teacher, but it's really the true purpose for learning. We want every student to achieve at high levels, and there's no better way to do that, to create that student-centered environment where they are responsible for their learning and they're helping each other to do so. So here's what I want us to do for the rest of our time. We're going to figure out how you can get started in your classroom. So the rest of this session, I want it to be more interactive, so I want you to ask questions. I'm going to ask you to practice some things that you might try in your classroom. So here's where you're going to get engaged a little bit. But here are steps to getting started. So you really have to have that shift, a mind shift from the classroom is yours, and you need for all your students to do as you say. And I know that seems really straightforward, but shift that thinking from you on a stage and students are listening to students becoming part of the stage and learning together. So it is a little bit of a shift. You have to have a purpose. These strategies and things that I'm going to share with you today are fairly simple. A lot of things you're going to be able to implement tomorrow, possibly. But you need to have a purpose for the strategies. You're going to teach the structures step by step by step, because as you know, at this age, this level, anything new, you want students to know clearly exactly what you're expecting them to do. So then you're going to practice the structure a lot. You may even have to go back and reteach, like every other skill that we talk about with our students. And we're going to begin the whole process with partners. So as you came in, I said, please sit in even numbers, 2, 4, 6. So right now, I want you to turn and look at someone next to you and claim them as your partner today. If you need to move or speak, you can.
Oh, there we go.
I got it.
You got it?
2.
Oh, perfect. I like it. I think we're just finding the partner. Oh, okay.
Same. Okay.
I'm just
So, as we go through the next couple of slides, you may look at your partner or your neighbor. Sometimes that's what we call them. Partners, pairs, friends, or neighbors. This is just an example of setting clear expectations before you get started with your kiddos, especially if this is something totally new to your students. I want to do a chart. So for the purpose of the next few things, you may turn to your neighbor at any point in time when I bring up when I'm explaining some of these strategies, and you can say to your neighbor, I do that. Or if you don't do that, you might say, I'll try that. And then your partner's going to respond with, okay, that sounds great. Okay? So do you want to try that first before we get started? So whoever your partner is, just turn and look them in the eye. You can give them a big smile. And one of you can say, I do that.
I do that.
I do that.
In response, the person listening is going to say, that's great. Or, hey, that's great. And then the person that responded this time is then going to say, I'll try that if it's something you haven't done before. Go.
I'll try
that.
And in response, you're going to say, that sounds great.
That sounds great.
So that's just a little technique that you might use with your kids when you're prompting them. I know probably everybody in here has had a time on the carpet where you've said, lean over to your shoulder partner and tell them something, or whisper in their ear. That's an easy technique. This just gives them a little more prompting about listening and speaking. So having them look them in the eye, each other in the eye, and then always having the person that's listening respond in some sort of fashion, because that holds both parties accountable to the learning process. So again, we're going to talk mostly about on the carpet things, whole group things, but I did include a couple of things that I'll model for you in just a second. But your shoulder partners become the essence of many things that are happening in your classroom. So that's where I focused most of the activities today. So you've probably heard knee to knee, eye to eye. If you haven't, or even if you have, you can participate. Turn to your partner, and on the carpet, students are turning as they're sitting crisscross applesauce, and they're actually putting their knees together. So knee to knee truly means knees are touching or very close. You don't have to touch if you don't want to.
We can touch knees.
And eye to eye means that you are looking at your neighbor, and your neighbor's looking at your neighbor. Okay?
No, my knees are at you. I'm ready.
Okay, so that's something maybe you can implement on the carpet that's a little different. Another technique on the carpet is this EEKK. I don't know if it's eek or ek or whatever, but it's elbow to elbow and knee to knee. So one of you or both of you turn side to side. So one knee is touching the other knee, and then elbows are touching. So that's another little.
Oh, I get it. I thought you
I'm picturing a child in my head.
So those two things are very much like the lean and whisper or share with the person sitting next to you. It does, I think, increase the accountability and the expectation of what you want students to do if they're speaking or if they're listening. And they like that too. I mean, they like to touch knees and they like to touch elbows and all that kind of thing. So what could partner work look like at the table? And this is the only time we're really going to talk about small group or individual. Well, it's not really individual anymore. Work that's not on the carpet. So as I was preparing, I was thinking, okay, I don't have any of my classroom stuff. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to go beg, borrow, and steal. So I went to the copier to print something off, and lo and behold, there's some stuff that I can use. So I think the cool thing about table work, partner table work, is that anything that you want students to do individually as a practice, they can do together. So what that could look like, and I was telling Susan today as I was getting all my stuff together, I literally went to the copier and found things that were laying in the copying room. So it was kind of like dumpster diving. I've never really done that, but it was kind of cool that I could go, oh, I can use this and I can use this. So this one is where students dot the letter, whatever the letter is up here, then they're going to put a dot on those letters and do a little matching thing. So I'm going to put a couple of those at the table. And then this one is highlight a letter. And I think my very first year here, somebody gave me this file and said, oh, this is great for small group or independent work. And what it looks like, it's very much the same thing. They're going to highlight. Another piece of it is where they write. Okay, so I'm going to put a couple of those on the table. You and your partner decide what you guys want to do. So pick one of those. You only need one sheet. So here's the difference. You're going to save a little bit on paper because not each of you will have your own paper. You're going to share the work.
Preference? What do we want to do with that?
And when students are working together on practice, on paper, you want to make sure that they have different colors for working. So I'm going to give you some highlighters. You pick one, let your partner pick one. Each of you write your name at the top in the color that you have, so that if I want to use this as a quick little assessment, I know who did what. Okay, so everybody got a paper? Everybody's got a highlighter. So I'm going to give you the directions for the activity. You're going to highlight the letter that matches the top, whatever that letter is, and you're going to take turns. So decide who's going to go first. Now here's a little tricky part because guess what? All 5-year-olds want to go first. So set some structures in place. For instance, for this activity, whoever has the longest hair is going to go first. And you can do all kinds of attributes. You can do who's had the birthday the closest to the date, or whoever's the tallest, or whoever has the most colors on. Get creative, but you decide who's going to go first. And then there's no question. There's no fighting. There's no bickering. You might have a little sad face, but you can talk about that too. If you didn't get to go first this time, you'll get to go first another time. So right now, just take 2 seconds with your partner. Take turns. Whoever's got the longest hair is going to go first. And you guys do this practice sheet together.
You guys have a hard time. I think I've got us beating this Patty just by a little bit. I was having which one? Acknowledge who's going first, like thumbs up or holding it up or something to say. And I think that's great. So that they would know and own it. Very good. All right, so I go first. What do I do? Do I go over the next one?
You go with the other one.
Oh, I haven't eaten.
I thought that was in half.
We've cycled through
I haven't
this.
eaten like
Yeah.
It really does need some.
You have your own. My turn again?
You don't know any different. It's not gonna hurt them.
I have some other ones that that have like more sound sorts on it, and I was gonna kind of do that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I know it's not really a cooperative learning strategy, but I know each of you all have a signal to get your students' attention. So you'll do your signal, like I did high five in my classroom, or the little clap, or whatever it is, a bell, to get everybody's attention. What are some things that you noticed, either you and your partner together, or as a group, that looked or sounded differently than had I said, each of you take one of these and do it? What looked or sound differently?
We thought it was therapeutic.
We
Okay.
were talking to each other.
Yeah, okay.
We
Brandy?
actually read the directions out loud to each other.
Nice. Very good.
What? I was gonna say, there's no, I'm done, and then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Like, that's something else for you.
It's true.
Like it, I mean, like, obviously with us, there's not as much, it takes 2 seconds, but for the kids, like, if you have like a slower and a faster one, it kind of like levels the, like, pace of the entire group.
It's more fun than working by yourself.
Absolutely, more fun. And for those kiddos that struggle with a page that looks like this, in addition to the back, all full and lots of things to do, we probably would not consider that a hard task, but for a student who has a little anxiety or some processing things, that probably looks like a job that is impossible. So minimizing, how many S's does a student need to highlight before you know they can recognize that that's the letter S? So it does allow for some differentiation in a different sort of way. And then, did anybody have a partner or a person working with them coach them, give them some advice about what to do or how to do it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Randy was like, what letter is that? I thought that was an F. And I said, no, that's letter E, because I have it in my name. And so I used that as an example to talk about the letter.
And I can
So help
believe,
each other.
I can attest to that Brandy will never forget the letter E or F, whichever
Never.
it was,
After that
because
conversation.
you told her and I didn't tell her. So back to creating that environment that's supportive and safe, students helping each other, and it's not the student versus the teacher anymore. And it is so much more fun. Okay, so let's keep moving along. The next slide is the structure, the Kagan structure, that I grounded everything that I did in my classroom that was partner work, pair work, neighbor work on. And it's stand up, hand up, pair up. And just a quick little story. I'll never forget, before I had gone to Disney World for the Kagan training, there were a couple of teachers in 4th grade that had already been, came back, and all I heard was, "Sue hoo poo." And I thought, what in the world are they talking about? And they were just raving and raving about this technique they had put in their classroom. So if you Google or if you Pinterest after today, you may find something that's SU, and it's just the abbreviation for stand up, hand up, pair up. Here's a little warning to you. It seems very simple. It is. But I can tell you from my experience with the classroom that I showed you the video of, sometimes you have to even break the most simple things down. So stand up, hand up, pair up. As I would tell my students, I'm going to tell you when I need for you to do those things. So I'm going to tell you about it first, then I'm going to model it for you, and then I'm going to let you practice it together. So that whole I do, we do, you do, and how that looks, that gradual release really is an effective way to teach these structures. So stand up, hand up, pair up is exactly what it sounds like. So I need a volunteer to come up and model with me, because I can't do cooperative learning without another person. Erin, come up here. So Erin and I are going to pretend to sit on the carpet, because this is where we are, and the teacher says to stand up. So we're going to stand up. Then we're going to put a hand up, and then we're going to turn to someone that's just right around us, and this is the part you really have to teach explicitly so they don't run across the carpet to their best friend who's way on the other side of the room. So then we're going to pair up. And so once we pair up, we face each other, we look at each other, and we say, "Hi, partner." Hi, partner.
partner.
So, and kids are great at echoing. And so that's the technique. Very simple, right?
Am I done?
Okay, you are done. So again, don't let the simplicity of it fool you, because with this particular class that had some challenging behaviors, I took the simple instructions of stand up, hand up, pair up to a next structure that we're going to talk about, and that is, and these are in no order, is mix and match. Mix and match, you start with stand up, hand up, pair up. Students are in pairs and they have something tangible, some sort of learning tool that they are going to match with one another. So in this particular classroom, I cut the words apart, stand up, hand up, pair up, and I grouped them in twos so that they would have a match, and then they had to talk about it. So we really spent a lot of time learning just the procedure, but we were using some of the other structures as well in the learning process. So from stand up, hand up, pair up on the carpet, you can do these other three activities. Rally Robin is where you and your partner are standing, and I'm going to let you guys try this here in just a second. You're standing facing each other, and the teacher says, name all the things that start with a B. So right now, stand up, hand up, just for the practice, pair up with your partner. Look at your partner.
Partner.
Howdy, partner. Got it. Hands are at your sides. You're giving them a big smile. The person who is the shortest will go first this time. And Jesse made a good point. Sometimes you have to have your students acknowledge to you to kind of hold them accountable who they've decided to go first. Because sometimes those partners will not, they'll just stand there and look at each other. So whoever is the shortest, raise your hand. So I know that's who's going first. And I'm going to time this, and this is also time shared pair, which it's the same thing, just a little different wording. So when I say go, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and you guys are going to say back and forth words that start with B. Remember who goes first, okay? Ready? Go.
Bananas.
Ball.
Big. Baseball. Ball. Basketball. Love it. Bingo. Barf.
Okay, high five. In my classroom,
I was gonna give you a high five.
Stop. Look at your partner and say, thanks, partner.
Thanks, partner.
And then you guys can sit back down. Like that. Each time I have in my classroom students do an activity that's a more formal activity like that, I always like to have them start with their partner with a greeting of some sort, and it can be silly or it can be just quick and easy, and then also some sort of closure, a thank you or a good job, or you may even want to do like they can pat themselves on the back or give each other a high five or fist bumps or whatever that might be. So that was Rally Robin, mix and match. Again, as I was looking for things to show you, and I won't have you do these, I again found some things in the dumpster or at the copier that you could use. Anything letters related, rhyming, number recognition, counting, subitizing, any of those things are great for mix and match. They could be things that are categorizing, things with wheels, things that roll, things that fly. You really just want to design those things so that in your classroom, when they are matching, you've got two that match. Now, we thought we were going to have a little bit of an issue at the beginning that someone was going to be a third wheel. That's okay. I don't call it a third wheel with my kids. Just call it a triangle, and then you just add enough time for the three to work together, and that works fine too. Or sometimes if you've got another adult, or if you can allow yourself to participate just to make even pairs. So there's all kinds of things that you have in your classroom, and I hope that I can represent this in an appropriate way, in an accurate way. Susan had a bunch of stuff in the closet, and I was like, I can use that. So you could do tangible things like shapes. They could match a 2D shape to a 3D shape. That's your partner matching. It could be the exact same object that they're matching. It could be small, and large. So any sort of attribute. You can actually, and I know all classrooms have letter tiles. It could be that, let's see, you're matching uppercase to uppercase or uppercase to lowercase. So anything that they can put in their hand. And again, that's another thing you have to touch. These are materials for learning, so you're not going to bend, twist, just like you do during small group or independent time. Anything that you can think of in your classroom that you have, pretty much you can grab and turn it into a mix and match. Or the next strategy that we haven't talked about is a quiz trade. So with quiz trade, you do your stand up, hand up, pair up, and maybe you've got every letter of the alphabet. And with quiz trade, students then become truly a coach or a teacher to each other, because 26 letters in the alphabet, somebody's probably not going to know one of those letters. So as they're going around, and I'll just have this first table model for you, what that looks like. So everybody gets a card. Anytime you're doing partner work on the carpet, you want to make sure everybody has something. So I'm going to ask you all to stand up, hand up, pair up. With quiz trade, I teach my kids to hold whatever it is in their hand like this, because it's a secret. Okay, so only them, the person that has it, knows what it is. So I coach them or guide them to look at it, make sure they know what they have. So they each have a letter. Then they're going to go to the person that's closest to them. They're going to start with their partner, and they are going to quiz their partner and see if they know what the letter is. Now, I do go through this big whole spiel. Is it okay not to know? Yes, it's okay not to know. What do you do if you don't know something? You ask, right? You ask the question. So it's okay to ask your partner to give you some help. Once they get the hang of doing this, I try to teach them not to tell them the exact answer, but to give them some hints. So we'll have these guys practice giving each other's hints, okay? So one of you doesn't know what the letter is. The other one's going to give a hint to try and coach that person along, okay? Are you ready? Go. So show your card to your person. See if she knows what it is. I'm going to quiz them. Did you get it?
It makes the sound b, b. Great job. It's a B.
Ooh, rhymes with. Well, okay. So once each person has said what they have, then they're going to physically trade the cards, and they're going to find a new partner. So this time you guys are going to branch out a little bit. You two become partners, and you'll do the same thing, and you two become partners. So you're going to quiz. Each person quizzes. Check and see if they know their letter. Coach.
I don't know.
An animal that flies.
All right. Be sure and thank your partner for coaching.
Thank you, partner. It was
You guys can have a seat. Thank you all. Now, since they were such good sports, we're going to give them a special cheer. And this is part of not just Kagan, but lots of things, but celebrating the learning, celebrating and praising hard work, effort, and success. So I did make you guys some copies of some crazy cheers. I've seen in classrooms in this building, I've seen them on cards, like in a can, and you draw them out. I've seen them on a little ring. I've seen them on sticks. But there are all kinds of crazy cheers, like the Elvis cheer, the Fantastic that I do a lot. So it goes like this. I gotta get my glasses on. So you tell the children, get out their spray bottles. So they get their spray bottles out. You hold it up with one hand and pretend to spray. So you're going to go, shh, shh, shh. You're fantastic, fantastic. So you you teach them the cheers. Here's one that I never did, but I like it. And it's when you're pleased with the way the children have accomplished something. You go into character and you go, that's the way I like So there's a whole list of cheers. I've seen, what is it?
The cheese grater.
What?
Great. You are great.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. The microwave, like this. Have you ever done the microwave? Or silent cheers. You know, I've seen lots of, fan fingers. And there's all kinds. They're lots of fun. The truck driver, and lots of times kids will ask to do certain ones. The truck driver is, so you get your CV out and you go, breaker, good buddy, good job. That's cute. So I do have copies of those. You guys can pass those out that you can take with you. Anything that I have forgotten to mention about Rally Robin, Quiz Trade, or Mix and Match?
I have a question about mix and match. Okay, so everybody gets something, and then, do they have to, only work with their partner, or do they they find that with somewhere in the room? So there's just everybody's moving to find the other person.
It would be my recommendation that, especially at the beginning, that you program this, because this is where you're facilitating and guiding the learning, that there's only one pair that matches. So they are going to find their match. It may not be their shoulder partner or the person sitting next to them. So it could look like, you guys want to practice what that looks like?
Maybe.
I've got, all right, let's practice what that looks like. I've got sets. Oh gosh, did I mix them up already? Let's see. How many? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay. So I've got a card for everybody. They have sets, so you're going to count your set. When you know how many is on your card, you're going to mix around the room and you're going to ask to find your match. So it may not be the person that you go to first, okay? So let me mix these up really well. So you're, again, having kids talk to each other, coach each other. So count your set. When you know how many you have on your card, stand up. Thanks for that. And when I say go, you're going to
I know, I was getting ready to
count until you find your match. When you find your match, you can just sit by your partner. Ready? Go.
I have one. Is it the picture?
It's match.
Match with the pictures?
Oh, the numbers.
Okay.
Just kidding, we're not farmers.
So that's true.
She matched.
Whoever has the object and then you have the extra variable.
When you do that, you're also And then anytime I do an activity like this, I always like to have partners share out so that everybody is learning what that pair is learning. So what was your all set? How many did you all have?
16.
16. Both agree?
16.
All right, good job, girls. What about your group?
I had 9.
9. Both of you had 9. Good.
Both had 20.
Great. I love how you all are showing your cards too, because students are watching and looking. What did you all have?
12.
Good.
We had 5.
Great. You have 8. Awesome. Turn to your partner and thank them.
Thank you, partner.
You guys can leave the cards on the table. So that's what that was. Does anybody else have a question about any of the structures? We're getting close on time. So, extras, let's go back, are the cheers. And I passed those out. Those are great, just kind of